The sun was shining bright over Makoro village, and drums echoed through the air as people gathered to celebrate one of the most beautiful events of the year, Zara's engagement ceremony. She stood at the center of it all, glowing in a hand-woven Kent cloth, her head wrapped in gold-trimmed fabric, and her neck adorned with beads that had belonged to her grandmother. Her smile lit up the courtyard. She was happy, nervous, and overwhelmed with love. This was supposed to be the best day of her life. Around her, women danced with baskets of flowers, children ran barefoot through the dust, and elders nodded in approval. Everything looked perfect on the outside. But not far from where Zara stood, something dark was brewing. Jabari, her soon-to-be husband, looked distracted. He wasn't smiling like he used to, and his eyes kept darting around. No one seemed to notice except Zara, who felt a strange chill despite the warm breeze. As the palm wine was being poured for the ceremonial toast, Jabari's hand moved quickly. No one saw it, but he slipped something clear and deadly into Zara's cup. He glanced at her, smiled, and handed it over with such charm. She took it with trembling hands, still unaware that the man she loved had just handed her death. The music slowed as the elder stepped forward to bless the union. Everyone gathered close, holding up their calabashes filled with fresh palm wine, ready to toast the love between Zara and Jabari. It was a sacred moment in Makoro tradition, where families came together to witness a bond sealed not just by love, but by ancestors' blessings. Zara stood beside Jabari, her fingers gently brushing his as they held their drinks. She was smiling, but something in her chest felt heavy. Maybe it was just nerves, she told herself. Maybe she was overthinking. Jabari, always the charmer, leaned in and whispered something sweet in her ear. She smiled, but her heart didn't flutter the way it used to. What she didn't know was that just seconds earlier, while she was distracted by the cheers of the guests and the sound of the talking drum, Jabari had done something unthinkable. With a calm hand and a practiced motion, he had slipped a few drops of a clear, odorless liquid into her calabash. No one noticed. Not her, not the elders, not even the drummers. His face was the same, warm, loving, proud, but his heart held something dark. The poison had been carefully chosen, fast but quiet. He had gone to great lengths to make sure it wouldn't leave a trace. This wasn't something done out of anger in the heat of a fight. It was planned, cold, calculated. The same mouth that had promised Zara a life of joy and children and growing old together was now smiling while handing her death in a drink. Zara looked at him, eyes full of trust. He looked back at her, eyes full of lies. They raised their calabashes together, surrounded by clapping and song. She didn't know that everything she believed in was about to be tested. That behind the love, behind the celebration was a deadly trap. One she had just almost walked straight into. Almost. Zara had always heard her mother say it. When your spirit stirs, listen. Even if no one else hears it, trust it. It was one of those sayings that sounded simple growing up, something her mother Ebony would repeat while braiding her hair or while they cooked by the fire. But now, in the middle of the biggest moment of her life, those words suddenly came alive in her heart. She stood there holding her calabash, ready to drink as the whole village cheered and clapped around her. The drums were loud, the dancers were spinning, and everyone's attention was on her and Jabari. But in the middle of all that noise, something inside her went still. She couldn't explain it. Her hand had just started to lift the cup when a strange, heavy feeling settled over her chest. It was like her body knew something her mind didn't. The smile on her face froze. Her heart began to pound, not from excitement, but from something colder, something sharper. She glanced at Jabari. He looked relaxed, even happy. His eyes were on her, soft and warm, like nothing was wrong. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. Like a whisper rising inside her telling her, "Don't drink. Not yet." Zara's fingers tightened around the calabash. Her palms were sweating. It wasn't fear she felt. It was something deeper. A warning. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, louder now. The body speaks. The spirit knows. Listen to it, even when love tries to quiet it. In that moment, surrounded by music and laughter, Zara realized she couldn't ignore the feeling. Her instincts were screaming, even if nothing around her made sense. She slowly lowered her drink, pretending to adjust her wrapper, her eyes scanning everything, Jabari's face, the guests, the drink itself. Everything outside looked perfect, but inside her spirit was already preparing for war. Zara stood still, her mind racing and heart pounding so loud she could barely hear the drums anymore. The calabash in her hand felt heavier by the second, like it held more than just palm wine. Her smile stayed fixed, but inside she was breaking apart. That feeling, that quiet, sharp voice deep inside her, wouldn't let go. It whispered that something was wrong with the drink, something was wrong with Jabari. And she knew, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Jabari turned to her with a soft grin and gently touched her arm, nudging her to raise her drink. The moment had come, the ceremonial toast. Everyone was watching. She had seconds to decide. Swallow her fear and drink it anyway? Or trust the warning inside her even if it made no sense? Her fingers moved before her brain could even catch up. With a slow, graceful motion, Zara leaned toward the table beside them, pretending to adjust the edge of her wrapper. Her hand brushed against Jabari's calabash as if by accident. With the tiniest shift, so quick and subtle no one noticed, she swapped them. Her drink for his. Her death for his. She straightened up, smiled at Jabari, and lifted the calabash he had poured for himself. Her hands were shaking, but she tucked them under her cloth, hiding the tremble. Her lips curved into a calm, sweet smile, the same one he had always loved. He had no idea the cups had changed. To him, nothing was different. He raised his drink full of confidence, eyes locked on hers, ready to toast to a future he never planned to share. To her, everything had changed. Her heartbeat was wild, her mouth dry, but she met his gaze and nodded softly. This wasn't about bravery. It wasn't about proving anything. It was survival. Pure, quiet, desperate survival. As Jabari brought the cup to his lips, Zara watched closely, her eyes no longer soft with love, but sharp with knowing. She said nothing. She just smiled. Jabari raised the calabash to his lips, full of charm and pride, like a man who had just won everything. His eyes sparkled as he looked at Zara, and he gave her a small smirk, as if he already saw her falling, already imagined her drinking the poison, already felt like he had succeeded. But in his hands now was not her cup. It was his. The one he had carefully poisoned. The one meant to end her life. And he didn't know. Zara sat beside him, her fingers digging into the side of her chair, hidden beneath her flowing cloth. Her whole body was tense, her breath held tight in her chest. She couldn't blink, couldn't look away. She watched every single movement, how easily he tilted the calabash, how confidently he drank it all down. Not even a pause. Not even a second thought. He believed she was the one who would die today. He wiped his mouth, let out a satisfied sigh, and gave her that same smile, the one that once made her heart skip. But this time she felt nothing but cold. She didn't smile back. Seconds passed. Then his hand twitched slightly. He blinked hard like something stung his eyes. His smile faded just a little. His face changed slowly like a mask melting away. His body began to shift, unsteady. Confusion crept into his expression, and he looked at her again. This time not with confidence but fear. Zara didn't move. Her hands were still clenched. Her eyes didn't leave his. She wanted him to know. She needed him to see. He had handed her death, but fate had handed it back to him. Jabari opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He staggered. The crowd was still clapping, still laughing. No one had noticed yet. But Zara knew. She just watched. The drums in Makoro beat louder, faster, like the heart of the village was celebrating with its people. Dancers twirled, laughter filled the air, and palm wine flowed like water. But at the center of it all, something shifted, something no one expected. Jabari's smile faded completely. His hands began to tremble just a little at first. He blinked rapidly like he was trying to clear his vision. Then came the sweat, running down his face even though the breeze had cooled. He reached out trying to grab the edge of the table but missed. His fingers slipped. His knees bent without his control. His proud, confident body began to fall apart in front of everyone. Zara sat still, eyes locked on him. She didn't move. She didn't blink. Her heart was thudding against her ribs, but outside she looked calm like stone. She needed to see it. She needed him to see it. To understand. To know. He turned to her, desperate and confused, searching for something. Maybe help, maybe forgiveness. But his lips couldn't form the words. His mouth opened then shut again. His breathing was heavy now. Each second felt like a lifetime. Then he collapsed. The calabash dropped from his hand and shattered against the ground. Guests nearby turned in shock. Screams rose. Someone shouted his name. Others rushed forward. Chaos exploded in the courtyard, but Zara didn't move. Her feet stayed planted. Her hands rested in her lap. Her eyes never left his face. She watched him struggle to stay conscious, watched his eyes dart around in fear, pain, and confusion. She knew the exact moment it hit him, that this wasn't her dying, it was him. That he had been the one poisoned, that the plan had flipped. He tried to speak again, but all that came out was a choked gasp. Zara finally stood, slowly, gracefully, like a queen rising in battle. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. He saw the truth in her eyes. And then, surrounded by drums and dust and betrayal, Jabari fell. As Jabari lay on the ground, his body twitching and his breath shallow, Zara stood frozen, her eyes locked on him, but her mind drifting far away. The noise of the crowd faded into the background, and all she could hear were memories. They came rushing in like a flood, one after the other, drowning her in things she had tried so hard to ignore. She remembered the late-night phone calls Jabari always stepped outside to take, whispering with his back turned. The way he'd always say, "It's business," and kiss her forehead to distract her. She remembered how he'd started disappearing for days, claiming trips to the next village or urgent work, always with perfect timing and perfect excuses. And she remembered the way her cousin Nia suddenly became so close to him. Too close. Always laughing at his jokes a little too loud. Touching his arm when no one else noticed. Offering to run errands for him that had nothing to do with her. Zara had felt the shift. Deep down she had known. But love has a strange way of making you blind to what you don't want to see. She had pushed the doubts away. She had convinced herself it was just jealousy. Just her own fear whispering lies. She had wanted to believe in him so badly. She had dreamed of their future, of children with his smile in her eyes. She had trusted him with everything. But now, standing there while he fought for his life from the very poison he meant for her, the truth hit her harder than anything ever had. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just the plan to kill her. It was that he had lied to her face again and again. And she had loved him through it all. The poison in that cup was cruel. But the betrayal that led to it, that was what truly burned. That was what broke her heart. Not the attempt on her life, but the fact that the man she almost married never really loved her at all. And that her own blood, Nia, might have known all along. The sky darkened without warning. Thick clouds rolled over Makoro like a heavy blanket. And then crack! Thunder tore the sky apart. Within seconds the rain came pouring down, fast and heavy, soaking everything. Guests screamed and scattered, pulling cloths over their heads, grabbing children, running for shelter. The celebration had turned into chaos. But Zara didn't move. She remained seated, her beautiful kente cloth drenched, clinging to her skin. Her hair, once perfectly wrapped, was now coming loose under the weight of the rain. She looked like a painting, soft, broken, and still in the middle of the storm. The world around her moved, but she stayed right there, staring at Jabari's motionless body lying in the mud. Her hands rested in her lap, soaked, trembling but steady. Her heart was shattered, but her face held no tears, only a numb kind of ache, the kind that doesn't scream. It just sits deep in your chest, heavy like a stone. The drums had stopped. The music was gone. All she could hear now was the sound of the rain and the whisper of her own heartbeat. She looked at him and the words slipped out of her mouth, barely louder than the rain. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me?" It wasn't even a question for him. It was more for herself, for the sky, for the ancestors, for whatever spirits had been watching. She had given him her heart, her dreams, her future. She had planned a life with him, a family, a home. She would have stood beside him through anything. And yet, he had chosen to destroy her. The rain washed over her like a baptism, but she didn't feel cleansed. Just cold. Empty. Everything she believed in had cracked open. She didn't know if she was mourning love, or mourning the part of herself that believed in love so deeply. Zara looked at the ground, her voice barely a breath now. What did I ever do to deserve this? And for once the world had no answer. Just thunder. Just rain. Just silence. The rain kept falling, soaking the earth and everything on it. But Zara stayed still, cold, quiet, but no longer confused. Her heart had broken open, and now all that was left was truth. Heavy truth. Painful truth. truth that couldn't be buried anymore. Slowly, she reached down to her silk waist wrap, her fingers steady despite the storm around her. Hidden deep inside a secret fold was a small crumpled letter, creased from the many times she had opened it, stared at it, reread it, trying to make sense of the words. She had found it just 3 nights ago, tucked inside Jabari's old leather bag. And from the second her eyes landed on his handwriting, she had known. This wasn't a love story. It had never been. With rain dripping from her fingers, she held out the paper. She wasn't even sure if he could hear her anymore. His body barely moved now, weak and fading, but she still said it, her voice cold and sharp like a blade. "Read this," she said, not yelling, just steady. The letter was simple but cruel. Written in Jabari's own hand. Every line spelled out betrayal. His plan was clear. Marry Zara, poison her quietly before the wedding, claim her late father's land as a grieving husband, and then begin a new life with Nia, Zara's own cousin, by his side. He wrote about it like it was business, like Zara's life was just a step in his plan. She had read those words over and over again, each time feeling the pieces of her heart crumble. She had wanted to confront him, wanted to scream, but something in her told her to wait, to act when it mattered most. And now this was that moment. Zara knelt beside him in the mud, holding the soaked letter close to his face. His eyes fluttered, barely open, but she saw a flicker of recognition. He knew what it was. He knew she knew. "You wrote your own end," she whispered, her voice like ice. "And I just watched it unfold." The letter dropped from her hand and sank into the mud, soaked like everything else, except the truth it carried. As the last word of Jabari's letter hung heavy in the air, people began to turn, not toward Zara, not toward Jabari, but toward Nia. The rain hadn't stopped, but the silence underneath it was louder than any storm. Nia stood just a few steps away, her bright wrapper soaked, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes darted from face to face, looking for somewhere to hide, but there was nowhere left. Zara slowly rose to her feet, not taking her eyes off Nia. Her body ached, her heart shattered, but in this moment she was steady. Her voice didn't rise, didn't need to. The truth had already done the screaming. "You helped him," she said, more like a fact than an accusation. Nia didn't answer. She didn't deny. She didn't cry. She just stood there, mouth tight, lips pressed together, her silence screaming louder than any defense. And in that silence, everything fell into place for the people watching. They remembered the whispers, the glances, the moments they thought were harmless. But they hadn't been harmless at all. Zara looked at her cousin, the girl who used to sleep beside her when they were children, who braided her hair before big festivals, who held her hand when their mothers scolded them. They had called each other sisters, even though blood already tied them close. But blood hadn't been enough for Nia. Not when land and inheritance were involved. "You sold me," Zara whispered, her voice trembling now. "You sold your own blood for what? A house? A title? A man who didn't even survive his own poison." Nia's eyes filled with tears, but it was too late for that. Regret couldn't undo betrayal. The villagers watched in stunned silence. Their celebration had turned into a courtroom. No one needed a judge, truth had already chosen sides. And in that rain-soaked courtyard, Zara finally saw it clearly. It wasn't the poison that had hurt her most. It wasn't even Jabari. It was the sister she never thought would turn against her. That kind of betrayal. The rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, as if even the sky had grown tired of crying. The village stood still, quiet, waiting. Then Chief Duma stepped forward, his long staff tapping against the wet earth with every step. His face, carved with age and wisdom, was lined with sadness, but also with strength. The weight of Makoro's justice rested on his shoulders, and in that moment, everyone turned to him. He looked down at Jabari's lifeless body, then at the soaked, trembling figure of Nia. No longer proud, no longer bold. Her eyes stayed on the ground, unable to meet his. 2 warriors stepped forward and took her gently by the arms. She didn't fight. She didn't speak. She just followed like a shadow, knowing her fate was already sealed. Chief Duma raised his hand and the crowd parted in silence. He walked toward Zara, slow and steady, his voice deep and calm like the river after a storm. "Today," he said, "we witnessed the hands of the gods." He placed a weathered hand on Zara's shoulder. "You were not saved by chance, child. The ancestors watched and they spared you, because your heart was pure. because the land your father left behind must not fall into wicked hands." The elders gathered around him, nodding slowly. One of them, Mama Sephu, who had known Zara since birth, spoke with a trembling voice. "Zara has seen death and betrayal, but she stood with dignity. She chose not to run, not to scream. She let truth do the work. That is the strength of a true daughter of this land." Another elder added, "The gods do not spare lightly. They chose her for a reason." The villagers murmured in agreement. What had started as a wedding had become a reckoning. Justice had spoken, not just through words but through truth revealed by fate itself. Zara lowered her head, not in shame but in quiet gratitude. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel proud. She just felt tired, broken, but alive. And in the middle of the ruined celebration, with her heart in pieces and her. The days after the storm passed slowly, like time itself was walking barefoot. The village returned to its rhythm. Markets reopened, children played again, the drums beat once more. But Zara didn't return with them. She spoke to no one, not even her mother. She answered kind greetings with a nod and soft eyes, but her voice stayed locked away, like it had gone with the rain that night. She left her mother's compound early each morning barefoot, wearing a simple wrapper, no gold, no beads, just herself. She walked alone down the narrow path past the baobab trees, down to the old fishing hut her late father had built by the river. It was small and quiet, a place most people had forgotten. But for Zara it was the only place that felt safe. The river always moved slowly this time of year. The water was calm, wide and deep, just like her sorrow. She would sit on the old wooden stool, wrapped in silence, her eyes following the current for hours. She didn't cry often. The tears had come earlier, in the dark hours of the first night, when no one could hear. Now it was just the ache that stayed, quiet and constant. She grieved Jabari, yes, but not for the man he turned out to be. She grieved the man she thought he was. The dreams they had built in her heart. The laughter they had shared, the secrets, the plans. It had all felt so real. How could something so false feel so warm at the time? But more than that, she grieved the version of herself that had loved blindly. The girl who trusted too easily. The one who believed love alone could protect her. That girl was gone now, buried with the calabash, the wedding songs, and Jabari's last breath. Zara didn't know what kind of woman would rise from this silence. But as she sat by the river, wrapped in wind and memory, she allowed herself to just be. To feel every ache. To mourn what was lost. To let her soul breathe again, even if it hurt. Some wounds don't close with time. Some need rivers. The sun had barely risen when the drummers began their gentle rhythm, calling the village to the square. Word had spread Zara was returning, not as the broken bride from that cursed celebration, but for something else, something sacred. The elders had spoken. It was time for the Edo rite of cleansing, a ceremony passed down through generations, used not just to heal but to restore, to return dignity, to welcome rebirth. Zara walked slowly into the circle barefoot, her head held high. She wore a flowing white dress handwoven with fine river pearls and soft cotton threads. The dress shimmered in the morning light like the surface of the water she had sat beside for days. Around her neck hung a single carved pendant, her father's. Her hair was wrapped in white linen, and her face carried no makeup, no smile, just peace. The village formed a wide circle around the fire pit in the center. Smoke rose sweet and thick, from herbs and oils placed by the elders. Mama Sephu stepped forward, carrying a small calabash filled with river water and crushed cleansing leaves. She walked in slow circles around Zara, chanting prayers in the old tongue, calling on the ancestors, the spirits, the protectors of women and truth. Another elder passed a white feather across Zara's shoulders, across her hands, her heart. One by one, each symbolic act shed the pain, the betrayal, the shadows that had tried to cling to her. The villagers watched, not with pity, but with awe. She had survived poison, lies, and heartbreak. And still she stood. When the final chant was spoken, Zara stepped to the fire and dropped a folded piece of cloth into the flames, part of the wrapper she had worn the day Jabari fell. The fabric curled, turned black, then disappeared. And with it she let go. She turned slowly to face her people. The wind lifted her dress, the drums quickened, and the sky seemed to open just a little. Zara didn't raise her arms. She didn't cry. She simply stood tall and still. Not as the Zara had once been, the quiet one, the girl who smiled politely, who kept her thoughts tucked away like folded linen. But something inside her had shifted forever. After the fire, after the cleansing, after the silence beside the river, she knew she could never go back to being unseen. Her pain had taught her too much. Her survival had become more than a second chance. It had become a calling. She started small. At first, it was just a few girls sitting under the mango tree near her mother's home. She spoke softly, telling them her story. Not the scandal, not the shame, but the truth. She told them how love should never feel like confusion. How fear is not a test of loyalty. How your spirit always knows before your mind does. And most of all, she told them, you are worth listening to. Word spread quickly. More girls came. Then young wives. Then mothers. Even elders began sitting in the back, nodding quietly as Zara spoke with a calm power that filled the air. She wasn't just telling her story anymore. She was handing out armor, wisdom, warnings, healing. She taught them about land rights, inheritance laws, what questions to ask before marriage, and the quiet signs of betrayal. But even more than facts, she gave them permission to speak up, to walk away, to choose peace over silence. The chief invited her to speak at larger gatherings. Soon, women from neighboring villages were coming just to hear her. They no longer saw her as the girl who had nearly died. They saw her as a voice that refused to be silenced. A woman who had taken what was meant to destroy her and turned it into a torch others could follow. Zara never raised her voice in anger. She didn't need to. Her presence was powerful enough. Every time she stood before a crowd, she remembered the girl who sat alone by the river, unsure if she'd ever feel whole again. Now that girl had a voice, and it echoed louder than the drums that once marked her downfall. Years later, in the quiet village of Makoro, there's a house by the river that everyone knows. It's small, painted a soft blue with white shutters and flowering vines curling up its walls. But it's not the color that makes people stop. It's the story. Children passing by slow their steps, point with wide eyes and whisper, "That's where Zara lives. The woman who switched cups and changed her destiny." The story has been told so many times that it feels like a song passed from mouth to mouth. Everyone knows how she faced betrayal and death at her own engagement. How she trusted her spirit, made one silent move and survived. But what made her name truly legendary wasn't just that moment. It was what she did after. Zara turned her pain into purpose. She became a teacher, a guide, a protector of other women. The house by the river became a safe place, where hearts came to heal and voices came to grow stronger. Inside there were always women gathered, talking, learning, crying, laughing. To the villagers, she wasn't just the woman who lived. She was the woman who stood, who looked death in the face and chose life, not just for herself but for others too. And even though Zara never chased fame or power, her name lived on like a prayer on the wind. A name mothers whispered to daughters when teaching them to be strong. A name that meant courage. A name that meant hope.